I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, gasping through a contraction that felt like lightning striking my spine. Behind me, my mother's voice still echoed through the phone. "The gala starts in 20 minutes, Elena. Just order a rideshare. Don't be dramatic." That was the night I realized I didn't have a family, I had a board of directors. And I was officially being fired. Before I tell you what happened that night and how everything in my life changed forever, take 1 second to subscribe to the channel if you love emotional storytelling with real human drama, shocking betrayals, and powerful endings. Like this video if stories like this hit you emotionally, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your country right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Rain hammered against the windshield so hard I could barely see the road in front of me. My breathing was uneven, and every few minutes another contraction tore through my body like a wave crashing into sharp rocks. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but I kept driving because there was nobody else coming for me. Nobody. Not my mother. Not my father. Not my sister. And the worst part was that deep down I wasn't even surprised. My name is Elena Vance, and for most of my life I believed being needed was the same thing as being loved. I spent years earning my place inside a family that only valued performance. If you made the family look good, you mattered. If you caused inconvenience, you became invisible. And I had spent my whole life trying not to become invisible. The Vance family name carried weight in the city. My father, Julian Vance, built one of the biggest architecture firms in the state from the ground up. His buildings were everywhere. Glass towers downtown, luxury hotels, corporate campuses. Every magazine interview called him a visionary genius. But the truth was much less glamorous. My father was brilliant at taking credit. I was the one who spent sleepless nights correcting dangerous calculations and redesigning unstable structures. I was the one fixing disasters before clients ever noticed them. While my sister Clara smiled at investors during champagne dinners, I sat in fluorescent offices at 2 in the morning, making sure the buildings actually stayed standing. Clara was beautiful in the effortless way magazines loved. Blonde hair always perfect. White designer coats. A smile that could make strangers trust her instantly. My mother adored her because Clara looked like success. I looked like exhaustion. By the time I turned 34, I had accepted my role in the family. I was the dependable daughter, the quiet daughter, the daughter who solved problems without asking for applause. Even when I got pregnant, things didn't change. Actually, they got worse. My mother treated my pregnancy like an inconvenience that interrupted her calendar. She hated how my body changed. Every family dinner came with comments disguised as concern. "Maybe don't wear fitted dresses anymore, Elena. You look tired all the time. Please stand behind Clara in photos, sweetheart." At first I laughed those comments off because that's what I had trained myself to do. Smile. Endure. Stay useful. But pregnancy changes something inside you. Not just physically, emotionally too. For the first time in my life, I started thinking about the kind of family I wanted my son to grow up around. And every answer terrified me. Leo noticed before I did. My husband worked as a paramedic and spent his days dealing with chaos, tragedy, and emergencies. But somehow he still came home kinder than anyone in my family had ever been. One night about a month before I gave birth, he found me sitting on the bathroom floor crying silently after my mother criticized my weight during a charity dinner. Leo knelt beside me, carefully resting his hand on my stomach. "You know what scares me?" he asked softly. I wiped my face. "What?" "That one day our son might think this is normal." That sentence stayed in my head for weeks. Because he was right. I had normalized emotional neglect for so long that I stopped recognizing it as cruelty. The gala happened on a freezing Saturday in November. The Centennial Gala. 6 months of planning. $5 million spent. Politicians, celebrities, developers, and investors all gathering under crystal chandeliers to celebrate 100 years of Vance architecture. My mother treated the event like the royal wedding. Meanwhile, I was 38 weeks pregnant, carrying trays in the kitchen because apparently my swollen ankles didn't match the aesthetic of the ballroom. I remember standing near industrial ovens while chefs shouted around me, My lower back ached constantly and the smell of seafood made me nauseous. Then the first contraction hit. Stopped me completely. Pain shot through my stomach and spine, so suddenly I grabbed the counter to stay standing. A caterer looked at me nervously. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just Braxton Hicks probably." But deep down I knew. This was different. I timed the next contraction on my phone. 6 minutes apart. My heart started racing. I walked carefully through the enormous mansion searching for my father. Guests floated through marble hallways carrying champagne glasses while violin music echoed across the ceilings. Everything sparkled. Everything looked perfect. Meanwhile, I felt like my body was splitting open underneath my dress. I found my father in his study adjusting his cufflinks in front of a mirror. "Dad," I whispered, trying to stay calm. "I think I'm in labor." He barely glanced at me. What timing! Another contraction tightened across my stomach, making me bend slightly. "I need to get to the hospital." He sighed impatiently, like I had interrupted an important business call. "Elena, your mother already told me you've been anxious all week." "Dad, this is real. The Sterling family arrives in 15 minutes. I stared at him, waiting for concern to appear on his face. It never did. Instead, he adjusted his tie again. "You've always had terrible timing." That sentence broke something inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a crack spreading across glass. I walked out of the study feeling numb. Part of me still hoped my mother would react differently. Maybe maternal instinct would finally appear when it actually mattered. I called her from the hallway while another contraction stole my breath. She answered immediately, sounding irritated. "What now, Elena?" "I need to leave. The contractions are getting stronger." There was a pause filled with distant orchestra music. Then she laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, please do not create a scene tonight. I'm serious. We have investors flying in from 3 countries. If you disappear now, people will panic." I pressed my hand against the wall, trying to breathe through the pain. "Mom, I need help." Her voice turned cold instantly. "If you're uncomfortable, then order a rideshare and quietly leave through the side entrance. Don't make this evening about you." I felt tears burn my eyes. Not because of the pain, because in that moment I finally understood something I had avoided admitting my entire life. My family did not love me. They loved what I provided. There's a difference. And once you finally see it, you can never unsee it. Another contraction hit so hard my knees nearly buckled. People in formal gowns walked past me without noticing. I looked around the mansion at the glittering lights, the expensive flowers, the polished floors, the giant portraits of generations of Vances staring down from the walls. For years I had sacrificed pieces of myself to protect this image of family perfection. And now when I needed them most, they treated me like an inconvenience, threatening their schedule. I slowly wiped my tears. Then I walked out into the storm completely alone. The rain was freezing against my skin as I stumbled toward my SUV in the dark driveway. Every step hurt. My contractions were getting closer together, and my entire body trembled from pain and adrenaline. Behind me, the mansion glowed with warm golden lights while laughter spilled out through the windows. The party had already started. Music echoed through the rain. Champagne glasses clinked. And somewhere inside that mansion, my family was smiling for photographs, while I stood outside trying not to collapse beside my car. I remember gripping the door handle and suddenly feeling terrified. Not because I was about to give birth, because for the first time in my life I truly understood what abandonment felt like. I slid into the driver's seat, breathing hard as another contraction tore through my stomach. My vision blurred for a second. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. Then my phone buzzed. For one stupid, hopeful moment, I thought maybe one of them had come to their senses. Maybe my father realized what was happening. Maybe my mother was calling to apologize. Maybe Clara finally cared about someone other than herself. But when I looked at the screen, it was only a text from Clara. "Please don't embarrass the family tonight." That was it. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Do you need help?" Just a warning. Like I was some unstable employee threatening the company image. I stared at the message while tears slid silently down my face. Then another contraction hit and I screamed out loud inside the empty car. That scream changed me, because after it passed, something inside me became strangely calm, cold, clear. I started the engine. The windshield wipers moved back and forth across the glass like a metronome, counting down the end of one life and the beginning of another. The hospital was 18 miles away. 18 miles through heavy rain while in labor. By myself. The roads were nearly empty except for reflections of red brake lights shining across wet pavement. Every bump in the road sent pain through my spine. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against my stomach, whispering to my baby the entire drive. "It's okay, Theo. Mommy's got you." At one red light, I suddenly started sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. Not graceful movie tears. Ugly, shaking heartbreak. Because I realized something devastating. If Leo had not existed, I would have been completely alone in this world. My own family would have let me suffer without a second thought. I remember being 7 years old, sitting alone backstage at a school recital, waiting for my parents to arrive. Everyone else had flowers and cameras. My father forgot because of a client dinner. My mother forgot because Clara had tennis practice. I remembered graduating top of my architecture program and hearing my mother whisper to a friend that it was such a shame Elena wasn't prettier because intelligence alone doesn't impress people. I remember planning my own bridal shower because my mother said she was too busy organizing Clara's fashion showcase. A lifetime of small wounds suddenly crashed into me all at once, and somehow that hurt even more than labor. By the time I reached the hospital, my contractions were less than 4 minutes apart. The parking garage lights blurred overhead as I pulled into a space crookedly. I could barely walk. A security guard rushed toward me with an umbrella, but I waved him off, trying to stay composed. I had spent my entire life pretending I was fine. Old habits die hard. Inside the maternity ward, everything smelled sterile and warm. Nurses moved quickly through bright hallways while exhausted fathers carried bags and flowers behind them. Families, support systems, people showing up for each other. The nurse at reception smiled kindly. "How far apart are your contractions?" "About 4 minutes." "Okay, honey, let's get you checked in. Where's your support person?" That question hit harder than expected. I looked down at my soaked clothes and trembling hands, then at my silent phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. I swallowed hard before answering quietly. "I'm the only one who showed up." The nurse's face changed immediately. Her expression softened in a way that almost made me cry again. "Well, you're not alone now," she said gently. Her name was Sarah. I will never forget that woman for the rest of my life. While nurses helped me into a hospital gown, Sarah stayed beside me, talking calmly through every contraction. She rubbed my back when the pain got unbearable and kept reminding me to breathe. Simple kindness. That's all it was. But when you've spent your life starving emotionally, even kindness feels overwhelming. Leo finally called while I was being wheeled into delivery. The second I heard his voice, I broke down. "Elena, what's wrong?" "I'm in labor." There was silence. Then pure panic. "What hospital?" "I'm coming right now." I could hear ambulance sirens in the background and the exhaustion in his voice from working nearly 16 hours straight. But none of that mattered. He was already moving. Unlike my family, he didn't hesitate. He chose me instantly. Hours passed in a blur of pain, sweat, tears, and exhaustion. Labor was harder than anything I had imagined. At some points, I honestly thought my body would split apart. And through all of it, my phone remained silent. Not one person from my family checked on me. Not one. Around 2 in the morning, the contractions became unbearable. Nurses rushed around adjusting monitors while Sarah held my hand tightly. "You're doing amazing, Elena." I shook my head, crying. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Another wave of pain hit and I screamed into the darkness. Then suddenly I heard footsteps racing down the hallway. Leo burst into the room, still wearing his paramedic uniform. His hair was soaked from rain and his chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath. The second our eyes met, I felt safe. Really safe. Maybe for the first time in years. "I'm here," he whispered, grabbing my hand. "I'm here, baby." And unlike every promise my family had ever made me, he actually meant it. At 2:14 in the morning, our son entered the world. The room filled with crying and movement and emotion so overwhelming, I can barely describe it even now. The nurse placed him on my chest, wrapped in a warm blanket, and suddenly everything else disappeared. The pain, the betrayal, the loneliness. All of it faded beneath the weight of this tiny human breathing against my skin. Theo opened his eyes briefly and wrapped his tiny fingers around mine. And in that moment, something inside me healed and shattered at the same time, because I realized I finally understood what unconditional love felt like. The kind my parents never gave me. Leo cried openly beside me while cutting the cord. I had never seen him cry before. He kissed my forehead over and over, whispering how proud he was. Proud. Such a simple word. Yet hearing it felt almost foreign. Hours later, as dawn slowly brightened the hospital windows, I finally checked my phone again. Still nothing from my parents. But social media was flooded with gala photos. My mother posing beside crystal chandeliers. Clara smiling with investors. My father shaking hands with executives. Perfect family. Perfect image. Perfect lies. One photo stopped me cold. Clara had posted a picture of herself in a silver gown holding a champagne glass with the caption, "Most successful night in Vance history." Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. Meanwhile, I had nearly given birth alone in a rainstorm. I stared down at Theo sleeping peacefully beside me, and suddenly the truth became impossible to ignore anymore. If I stayed connected to my family, my son would eventually become collateral damage in their world too. He would grow up watching me shrink myself for people who never valued me. He would learn that love means earning approval. And I refused to let that happen. Because the moment I held my son for the first time, I made a silent promise. The cycle ends with me. The morning sunlight creeping through the hospital blinds should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt painfully quiet. Theo slept beside me in his little hospital bassinet, making soft sounds every few seconds while machines beeped steadily around the room. Leo had finally fallen asleep in the chair near the window, still wearing his wrinkled paramedic uniform. One of his hands rested protectively against the side of the bassinet, even in sleep. That small detail nearly broke me, because even exhausted beyond reason, he still showed up. He still protected us. I picked up my phone again sometime around 9 in the morning. Part of me hated myself for still hoping to see something different. An apology, concern, anything. Instead, the first thing I saw was 73 unread messages in the Vance family group chat. My stomach tightened instantly. I opened it slowly while Theo slept beside me. The first message was from Clara, sent at 1:07 a.m. "Can everyone agree Elena has the worst timing in human history?" Several laughing reactions followed. Then my mother responded, "She's always needed attention during important events." Another message from Clara, "I swear if she posted a labor selfie tonight, I would disown her." More laughing emojis. I felt heat rise into my face. Every word felt unreal, cruel in such a casual, effortless way that it almost made it worse. Then I reached my father's message, sent at 2:48 a.m. "The Sterling contract is officially signed. Focus on what matters, everyone." That was it. No congratulations. No concern for his daughter. No acknowledgement that his grandson had been born less than 40 minutes earlier. Just business. Focus on what matters. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Then another message appeared from my mother, sent only an hour earlier. "Has anyone checked whether Elena exaggerated again?" Something inside me finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely. For years I had defended them to myself. I made excuses for their behavior because accepting the truth felt too painful. I told myself my parents were emotionally distant because they were stressed. I convinced myself Clara was selfish because she was insecure. But no, some people simply choose themselves over everyone else. Again and again. And eventually you have to stop begging them to become different people. I slowly removed the silver locket hanging around my neck. My father gave it to me when I graduated top of my architecture class at 22. It was one of the only moments in my life where he ever looked genuinely proud of me. Or at least I thought he was. Now I wondered if he had only been proud because my success benefited the company. The locket suddenly felt heavy in my hand. Meaningless. I looked across the room at the bright red biohazard bin near the hospital door. Then without hesitation I threw it away. The tiny metallic sound it made hitting the bottom felt strangely final, like burying the last piece of the daughter who kept trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. Leo woke up a few minutes later and immediately noticed my face. What happened? I handed him the phone silently. He read the messages slowly and I watched his jaw tighten harder with every line. Finally he looked up. They're monsters. I shook my head tiredly. No. Monsters know they're evil. He moved beside the bed carefully holding my hand. You don't owe them anything anymore, Elena. Those words sat heavily in the room, because deep down I knew he was right. But walking away from your family, even a toxic one, feels terrifying. Feels like cutting away part of your identity. You spend years believing maybe next time things will change. Maybe next birthday. Maybe next holiday. Maybe next crisis. Maybe next accomplishment. Maybe next time they'll finally love me correctly. But next time never comes. The next few weeks changed me in ways I didn't expect. Motherhood stripped away every illusion I had been carrying. Sleepless nights feeding Theo at 3 in the morning somehow gave me clarity instead of exhaustion. Every time I held my son, I kept asking myself the same question. How could anyone treat their child the way my parents treated me? The answer never came. My mother finally visited when Theo was 9 days old. Not because she wanted to, because people had started asking questions. She arrived wearing a cream cashmere coat carrying flowers that still had the luxury florist tag attached. Clara followed behind her filming pieces of the apartment for social media. The second my mother walked inside, she frowned. Oh, Elena, this place is tiny for a baby. Not hello. Not how are you feeling. Not can I hold him. Just criticism. Leo immediately stood up from the kitchen table. Maybe start with congratulations. My mother ignored him completely. She walked toward Theo's bassinet, adjusting her expensive bracelet. Well, let me see the little celebrity. The Vance heir finally arrives. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Not Theo. Not your grandson. The Vance heir. Like he was already another asset for the family brand. When she reached for him, I instinctively stepped between them. A strange silence filled the room. My mother blinked slowly. Elena, I'm not ready for visitors. Her expression hardened instantly. You cannot seriously still be upset about the gala. I almost laughed. Upset? Such a small word for abandonment. You told me to take a rideshare while I was in labor. Oh, for heaven's sake, stop exaggerating. Women give birth every day. Leo slammed his coffee mug down so hard it startled everyone. She drove herself through a storm while having contractions because none of you cared enough to help her. Clara rolled her eyes dramatically from the couch. Can we not turn this into another emotional trial? Mom and Dad had investors there. I looked at my sister for a long moment. Then I realized something shocking. She genuinely believed they were justified. That was the terrifying part. Not the cruelty. The normalization of it. You know what's funny? I said quietly. I spent years thinking I was the weak one in this family. My mother crossed her arms impatiently. Because you are emotionally weak, Elena. I looked down at Theo sleeping peacefully against my chest. Then back at her. No. I was just the only one who still had empathy. That sentence hit harder than I expected because for once my mother had no immediate response. The room went completely still. Finally, Clara scoffed awkwardly. This dramatic phase after childbirth is honestly exhausting. Leo stepped forward instantly. You need to leave. My mother's eyes widened. Excuse me. You heard me. She looked horrified that someone had finally spoken to her without fear. You do realize who this family is? Leo didn't even blink. No. I realize who they aren't. For the first time in my life, someone defended me without calculating consequences first. And my mother hated it. She grabbed her purse furiously. You are making a terrible mistake, Elena." "No," I whispered softly. "I made the mistake years ago when I kept begging people like you to love me." The door slammed behind them moments later, and instead of grief I felt relief. Pure relief. Like fresh air entering a room that had been locked for years. A week later, invitations went out for Theo's naming ceremony. Not a luxury ballroom. Not a staged media event. Just a simple gathering at a local park beside the lake. People who truly cared about us came immediately. Leo's co-workers volunteered decorations. Sarah and several nurses from the maternity ward offered to help organize food. My co-workers from the architecture firm brought handmade gifts for Theo. Nobody cared about status. Nobody cared about appearances. And for the first time in my life, I experienced what genuine community felt like. Not transactional relationships. Not strategic networking. Love. Real love. Meanwhile, my family remained silent for nearly 6 weeks. Then suddenly my father called. Not to apologize. Not to repair things. But because rumors about family tension were spreading among investors. And appearances mattered again. I almost didn't answer when my father called. His name flashed across my phone while I was rocking Theo to sleep in the living room. Outside the apartment windows, snow drifted slowly through the city lights. Everything felt calm for once. Peaceful. The exact opposite of the world I grew up in. Leo looked over from the kitchen, quietly watching my expression. "You okay?" I nodded even though I wasn't sure. Then I answered the call. My father's voice came through cold and controlled as always. "Elena." No warmth. No emotion. Just business. "I assume you've seen the invitation for the ceremony," I said calmly. "Yes. Your mother thinks this public distancing has gone far enough." I let out a small tired laugh. Public distancing. That's what this is. "No, Dad. This is called consequences." Silence. I could almost picture his jaw tightening. "You're embarrassing the family." There it was again. The family image. Always more important than the actual people inside it. "I nearly gave birth alone because you people cared more about a gala than your daughter. You're being emotional. And you're incapable of accountability." The silence after that felt dangerous. My father was not used to being challenged. Especially not by me. Finally, he lowered his voice. "The Sterling Group has started asking uncomfortable questions. Clara says you've been speaking negatively about the family." I almost laughed again. Speaking negatively. As if the truth itself was somehow disrespectful. "I haven't said anything, Dad." "Then why are people talking?" "Because actions have consequences even when rich people commit them." His breathing sharpened. "You need to stop this behavior immediately." For a moment I looked down at Theo sleeping peacefully against my shoulder. Then I realized something powerful. I wasn't afraid of my father anymore. Not even a little. "No," I said quietly. "I don't." Then I hung up. My hands shook afterward, but not from fear. From freedom. The naming ceremony happened on a bright cold Sunday afternoon 6 weeks later. The park beside the lake looked beautiful under the pale winter sunlight. White folding chairs lined the grass while soft music played from small speakers near the trees. Someone hung tiny silver stars above the picnic tables because Theo's nursery theme was moonlight and constellations. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't expensive. But it felt real. And real was something my family never understood. Sarah arrived early carrying homemade cookies shaped like tiny clouds. Leo's fellow paramedics spent half the morning joking while setting up decorations crookedly. My co-workers brought warm blankets and thermoses filled with coffee. People laughed naturally. Nobody performed. Nobody networked. Nobody cared about status. I kept looking around, almost overwhelmed by the simple honesty of it all. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Around noon, guests began gathering near the small wooden platform by the lake where we planned to officially announce Theo's name and share a few words. I wore a simple cream sweater dress with Theo wrapped against my chest in a blue blanket. Leo stood beside me holding my hand constantly like he somehow knew I still needed reassurance. Then suddenly the atmosphere shifted. A black luxury SUV rolled slowly toward the park entrance. My stomach tightened instantly. The Vances. Of course they couldn't stay away. Not from an audience. My mother stepped out first wearing an expensive white coat and oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. Clara followed behind her in designer boots carrying a gift bag with the luxury store logo facing outward like a product advertisement. My father walked several steps ahead of them, already looking irritated by the cold. Even arriving at a family gathering felt like a press conference to them. Conversations around the park quieted as they approached. I could physically feel old anxiety trying to crawl back into my chest. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. But then Leo squeezed my hand once, and suddenly I remembered who I was now. Not their employee, not their emotional punching bag. A mother. Someone responsible for protecting her child from exactly this kind of toxicity. My mother walked directly toward the front row seats near the platform. "Elena, move these blankets," she said casually. "Your father and I should sit here." I stepped in front of the chairs before she could touch them. "No." Her expression froze. "What did you say?" I said no. The entire park went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop moving for a second. My mother lowered her sunglasses slowly like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Don't embarrass yourself." I looked her directly in the eyes. "You already handled the embarrassment 6 weeks ago." Clara crossed her arms dramatically. "Oh my God, Elena, are we still doing this? Doing this?" Like my pain was some exhausting performance inconveniencing everyone. My father stepped forward, clearly losing patience. "We came here to support the child." I stared at him in disbelief. "The child you ignored while I was in labor?" His face hardened immediately. "Enough. No, Dad. You don't get to decide when enough happens anymore." I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my chest, but I kept going because years of silence were finally breaking apart all at once. "You told me the sterling contract mattered more than your daughter giving birth." My mother scoffed loudly. "For heaven's sake, stop being dramatic in public." That sentence did it. Every buried humiliation, every dismissal, every lonely moment, everything rose to the surface at once. I stepped closer to them, holding Theo protectively against my chest. "Do you know who stayed with me while I was terrified and alone in that hospital?" I asked quietly. Nobody answered. I pointed towards Sarah sitting near the front row. "She did." Sarah looked startled immediately. "The nurses held my hand while I cried because my own mother wouldn't answer the phone." Guests around the park shifted uncomfortably. My mother's face flushed red. "Elena, stop this immediately." "No. I spent 30 years stopping myself for you people." I looked around at everyone gathered there, then back at my parents. Family shows up when things are hard. Family doesn't tell a pregnant woman to quietly disappear because she might ruin a seating chart. Clara suddenly laughed nervously. "You're seriously turning labor into some heroic trauma story." I turned toward her slowly. "You posted jokes about me while I was giving birth." Her smile disappeared instantly. Several people nearby exchanged shocked looks. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice threateningly. "This conversation ends now." But something had changed inside me permanently. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to survive their approval anymore. I was protecting my peace. And there's power in that. "No," I said calmly. "Actually, this relationship ends now." My mother stared at me like I had slapped her. "You cannot cut off your family." I looked down at Theo sleeping peacefully against my chest. Then I answered softly, "I can when my family keeps confusing love with control." Nobody spoke. The lake behind us rippled quietly in the cold wind while years of dysfunction finally collapsed into silence. Then Leo stepped beside me. "You need to leave." This time his voice carried no anger, only certainty. My father looked around, realizing something horrifying. Nobody was defending them. Not one person. Because for once their money, status, and reputation could not erase what they had done. My mother's eyes filled briefly with something unfamiliar. Not guilt. Humiliation. She grabbed my father's arm sharply. "Let's go." Clara looked furious but followed them toward the SUV without another word. My father paused before leaving completely. For one second, I thought maybe he might finally say something real, something human. Instead, he looked at Theo one final time and said coldly, "You're making a mistake you'll regret." Then they left. And as their car disappeared down the road, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. Not broken. Not devastated. Free. After my family left the park, the silence felt almost unreal. Nobody moved for a few seconds. The cold wind drifted across the lake, carrying the sound of distant birds while everyone processed what had just happened. I stood there holding Theo against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear anymore. It felt like my entire life had cracked open in front of everyone, and somehow I survived it. Then Sarah slowly stood from the front row and started clapping softly. One by one, other people joined her. Not loud, dramatic applause. Gentle, supportive, human. I looked around at the people gathered there, and suddenly tears filled my eyes again. But these tears felt different from the ones I cried in that rainstorm weeks earlier. Those tears came from abandonment. These came from healing. Leo wrapped his arm around my shoulders while Theo slept peacefully between us, completely unaware that his existence had already changed everything. The ceremony continued after that, but differently than planned. Less scripted. More honest. When it was finally my turn to speak, I walked slowly toward the small wooden platform beside the lake, holding Theo carefully in my arms. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. The sunlight reflected across the water while everyone waited quietly. Then I looked down at my son. "When I was younger," I began softly, "I used to think strength meant enduring pain silently." My voice shook slightly. I thought being a good daughter meant sacrificing parts of myself to keep everyone else comfortable. Several people lowered their eyes quietly. But becoming Theo's mother taught me something completely different. I kissed the top of his tiny head gently. "Love should never feel conditional." The words hung in the cold afternoon air. You should never have to earn basic kindness from people who claim to care about you. I looked toward the empty road where my parents' SUV had disappeared. For years I kept trying harder, working harder, staying quieter, hoping eventually my family would love me the way I loved them. A painful smile crossed my face. But some people only love what benefits them. The honesty of that sentence hit the crowd hard, because everyone there understood it wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about every person who had ever begged for love from emotionally unavailable people. I took a slow breath. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop begging. Complete silence. Even the children playing farther down the park seemed quieter somehow. Then I smiled down at Theo. So today isn't just about naming my son. It's about breaking cycles. It's about building a different kind of family than the one I came from. Leo's eyes filled with tears beside the platform. A family built on presence, honesty, safety, compassion. I looked directly at Sarah, then toward Leo's coworkers and my friends gathered around us. Real family are the people who show up when things are difficult, the people who sit beside you in hospital rooms, the people who hold your hand when your world falls apart. My voice finally broke completely. And I promise my son will never have to question whether he is loved. A few people quietly wiped tears from their faces. Then everyone applauded again softly, while I stepped down from the platform and returned to Leo. The rest of the afternoon passed warmly. People laughed together while holding Theo carefully one at a time. Sarah cried while rocking him near the lake. Leo's friends grilled food badly and argued over directions like brothers. My coworkers shared embarrassing stories about my perfectionism at the office. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel lonely inside a crowd. That night, after everyone left and Theo finally fell asleep at home, I sat quietly on the couch staring at the city lights outside our apartment windows. My phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. "Hello." A calm older woman answered immediately. "Elena Vance?" "Yes. This is Margaret Sterling." My entire body stiffened. Margaret Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Group, one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country. The same woman my parents had spent months desperately trying to impress. Her voice remained calm and professional. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, not at all. There was a short pause before she continued. I was present at the gala 6 weeks ago. My stomach tightened instantly. I overheard a conversation between your mother and yourself in the hallway. I closed my eyes slowly. Of course she had. Margaret Sterling sighed quietly. I watched you walk out alone during a storm while in labor. The room suddenly felt very still. I've spent 30 years building companies, Elena, she continued softly. And one thing I've learned is that character eventually reveals itself when money is involved. I didn't know what to say. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. The Sterling Group has decided to terminate its partnership with Vance Architecture. My breath caught. What? There is a morality clause within our executive agreements. Your family's conduct raised concerns about leadership ethics and internal culture. I sat frozen in silence. Millions of dollars. Gone. Because someone finally saw through the performance. Margaret's voice softened slightly. You deserved better that night. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Not because of revenge. Because after a lifetime of emotional neglect, someone finally acknowledged the truth. And sometimes validation heals wounds you didn't even realize were still bleeding. Over the next 2 months, everything collapsed for the Vances publicly and financially. Without Sterling Group, other investors quietly pulled away too. Rumors spread fast through business circles. Employees began resigning. Old complaints about Julian Vance's behavior resurfaced. Articles appeared questioning company leadership and toxic workplace culture. The empire cracked faster than anyone expected. Then one rainy evening, my father finally called me again. This time there was no arrogance left in his voice, only desperation. Elena, please. I stood quietly in Theo's nursery holding the phone while soft lullaby music played nearby. We need help. We, not family, not daughter, just need. Always transactional. My father continued speaking rapidly. The banks are freezing accounts. The board wants answers. Margaret Sterling refuses to return calls. I listened silently. Then he finally said the words I never thought I'd hear. I was wrong. The sentence landed strangely inside me. Not satisfying. Not triumphant. Just sad. Because sometimes apologies arrive long after they can repair anything. I looked over at Theo sleeping peacefully in his crib. Then I remembered myself driving through that storm alone. Terrified. Abandoned. Forgotten. And I realized something important. Forgiveness does not always mean access. You told me something the night I went into labor, I said quietly. Silence. Then I repeated his own words back to him. Sounds like a crisis, Dad. His breathing caught instantly. I stared out the nursery window at rain sliding slowly down the glass. Maybe you should call an Uber. I'm busy. Then I hung up. 6 months later, Vance Architecture officially filed for bankruptcy. And 1 year after that, I bought part of the company assets alongside several former employees who trusted me enough to start over together. No giant gala. No champagne towers. No fake perfection. Just people building something honest from the ruins of something toxic. Today our company is smaller but stronger. We treat employees like humans instead of machines. Nobody is punished for having families or emotions or difficult days. And every time I walk into the office carrying Theo on my hip, I remember the woman I used to be. The woman who kept shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's approval. She's gone now. Sometimes people ask if I miss my parents. The truth is complicated. I miss the idea of the family I wanted, but not the reality I survived. Last winter I saw my mother by accident at a grocery store downtown. She looked older somehow. Smaller. She stared at Theo for several seconds like she wanted to say something meaningful. But she didn't. Because some people spend so much time protecting their pride that eventually there's nothing left underneath it. As for me, I finally built the life I deserved. Not because my family gave it to me, because I stopped letting them take it away. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the only way to build something beautiful is to let the old foundations crumble first. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, And turn on notifications for more emotional cinematic stories just like this one. And before you go, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your country right now. I read as many comments as I can, and I love hearing from all of you around the world.